Thanks for joining us on Choices Global, a production of First Assembly of God, LNP Durban Street, Workmanville, Georgetown, Guyana. Self care is not selfish, will be the topic of today's discussion. And as always, we have a great lineup of women joining us. And these were the same women who we discussed a few weeks ago women's health. We have with us again financial expert Chevon Corbin, who lives in Geneva with her family. Dr. Kezia Lee, a physician for over 10 years, a pediatrician, a wife and a mother of two. LaShonda Kelman, final year student at the University of Guyana. And Imani McKenzie, an optometrist, all joining us from Guyana. And yours truly, Celicia Pariag in the US. You know, when we hear self care, immediately we get visions of pink bubble baths, fluffy slippers, massages, manicures, pedicures. And yes, those things do have a place in our self care routine. However, when we talk about self care, what we're talking about today, we are speaking to a holistic care of the self, and we will be examining the emotional, the mental, the physical, the social, and the spiritual aspects of mental health and self care. And you may find us using those interchangeably, but we will discuss this further as we go along. And so today, I want to welcome our panelists once more. Welcome to you, ladies. Dr. Kiziam, we're going to start off with you. As the physician among us, the one who will bring that perspective to our discussion. Discuss with us today or introduce us to what it means when we talk about mental health and self care from your perspective, your profession as a medical physician.
Okay. Well, thank you, Felicia, for that question. Um, when we examine health generally, as Felicia would have mentioned, it's a state of well-being, physically, mentally, socially, emotionally, as well as spiritually. But when we talk about mental health, it speaks to a state of well-being that allows the person to be able to realize their full potential, to be able to cope with everyday activities, to be able to fruitfully engage in society and to be able to communicate. It speaks to a person's ability to cope with stresses and difficulties that might arise in everyday life, as well as their ability to engage fruitfully and productively in society. So it speaks
Mhm.
to a person's psychological and emotional well-being.
Thanks, Dr. Kizia, for that. Chevon, as a wife, a mother, and a consummate professional, financial professional, can you talk to us about mental health in the workplace and give us examples of how you find women can cope in the workplace?
Well, Celicia, I think when I reflect on mental health, I pick on a word from Dr. Kizia, and that's stress. During
Mhm.
the pandemic, I believe there was an opportunity that arose, and that was for employees or employers rather to acknowledge that the heavy workloads, deadline pressures, and all these other
Mhm.
things that come with delivering on the job have been how do I say, a huge stress on employees. And so mental health and well-being became a larger conversation to the point that WHO acknowledged burnout as an acknowledged disease, and this paved the way for many employers rather to provide support and also provide insurance, which is critical, in this side of the world. And so, from a professional perspective, I can say that being a wife, being a mother, being a leader in my organization, and also being in ministry means that there's several sets of activities that I'm managing, all that I want and desire to do with quality. And so that can lead to exhaustion, it can lead to tiredness and all that. But what I want to leave with us and the viewers is that burnout is real and it should be acknowledged. It's not something that you only see in the first world. I think sometimes our culture tells us that we can't have mental health issues or we can't be burnt out because we're just used to there's a gap, there's a need, and we have to work for what we get. But I want to signal to persons that there are three symptoms to burnout that we should start to reflect on as we try to practice self care. And three of those are exhaustion, cynicism, meaning that you're no longer happy with life, you're always irritated or negative about everything around you, and they say inefficacy, where you start to feel that you're not enough, you're not worthy. And so as women, we sometimes mask all of that by wearing a mask, or like I say, trying to wear our superwoman cape. But I dare us that it's time for us to start a conversation, take our capes off, and really try to heal as we practice self care methods that I'm sure the other ladies will chime in on.
Thank you, Chevon. And Dr. Kizzy and yourself really did mention and the same word, stress, and it's self care really is taking that time, as Dr. Kizia pointed out, taking that time to do things that help you to live well and improve your health, both physical and mental health. And I know sometimes in the Caribbean, we have this stigma attached, or when you hear mental health, you think someone is in a different spectrum. But we have learned over the last 2 years, especially with coming out this post-pandemic period, that it's real. And Chevon, as you pointed out, it's something that we need to take stock of, and there are things that we can incorporate in our daily lives that can help us with those areas. Imani and Lashonda, the youngest women in among us here today, why don't you talk to us about, as a young person, you, Lashonda, you're still in school, and well, both of you are still studying. How do you cope, or what are some ways that you can address mental health among your peers, and especially and also our girls?
Okay, thank you, Salisha, for that one. I would like to mention firstly that, you know, in our generation, we're the social media generation. Everything we're on social media for. And something that I've noticed is that, we put a lot of our lives on the social media platform. And as a young person is easily you can easily be influenced by what you see on social media, and you can be quite pressured by what you see other people are doing. So something that has been quite prevalent is that people or young people see other persons doing things, making things happen, and we start to feel pressured by what others are doing, and we're not there yet. So I think that it's important for us to know that we have our own race to run, and we have things will happen for us in our own time, and not to be caught up by what we see happening to other people, because that creates pressure on ourselves. So that is one thing that I would like to mention.
Adding to what Imani had said, life is not without stress. And so simply because you are experiencing some difficulty in life doesn't mean that you have a problem. I think with the social media age came along a lot of self-diagnosis, and because of that, we tend to over exaggerate on many of our issues we have in life. However, this doesn't mean that someone we know, some woman we know, doesn't experience these issues. What it means is that we need to talk more about our everyday situation, what may burn us, and seek help and guidance, especially from the older women who would have experienced this already, and they would help us to cope with the situation. Of course, we have to be careful who we approach and how we approach these things, because there are many persons out there who would want to misguide us, lead us in the wrong direction. But I think one of the things that our generation has done, which has brought a lot of benefit, is bringing the conversation out there, talking about it. And so we realize that, hey, maybe
the way I'm approaching this was wrong, or maybe how I saw my mother did it was wrong. And so we have developed better coping mechanisms to our stressors in life. In addition to that, not everything we see is there at face value. Some of these things, there are lots of work going on behind the scenes. So if you see someone living the life that you want to live, then they did not necessarily get that overnight. So there must be some amount of work that you have to put in there. And so it's not about who finishes the race faster. It's about if we can get there and within our own time and at our own pace.
Thank you, Lashonda. You've made some very critical points there, and I must admit, you sound quite grown. Schooling us, and really, you're really introducing us to balance and boundaries. Um, we may examine things, and as Imani introduced to the whole social media, and everything we do, we put it out there, and they set some unrealistic expectations. But Siobhan, talk to us about boundaries and how we can set those as professional women, as women studying, as girl, even girls, because I'd really like us to talk to also to our girls who are looking to us, older women, for an example, and we want what we have missed maybe as growing up when we had a different way of life. How can our young women, our girls, set boundaries, healthy boundaries?
Well, Salisha, I think that for someone who has struggled with boundaries, it might be good that that I share some of the practical examples. I think in this new age, us pursuing success, us pursuing studies, us having technology at our fingertips, though there are positives, there are some negatives that are creeping into our lifestyles, and we need to manage them. And I'll give two examples. For example, as a Guyanese transitioning to Switzerland, you felt that when you arrived and you got this really nice job, that you really needed to work hard. And the same might be for persons working wherever they are. You get promoted and you want to prove yourself because you want promotions and you really want to be in your A game or at the top of your, professional ladder. But that comes with some drawbacks. And one of them is that you could find yourself working 12-hour and 16-hour days. And then if you do a kind of a pie chart and you draw a 16-hour day, it shows that you really only have 8 hours to sleep, to do family and everything else. And I'm pretty sure that this might be the example for persons who are studying and desiring to graduate, summa cum laude or magna cum laude, persons who are in ministry. And so I wanted to touch on all of them. And then there are the women and men too, who are managing work, family, and studies. And so it means that from time to time, we have to learn how to start to redraw boundaries. I give a second example. I work in the first world or in Europe, and when you arrive, they hand you a laptop and a telephone, and you feel special because they pay the telephone bills and all that. But then you realize that the phone is encroaching into your personal and family time because every time it pings, it's right there where you're checking your WhatsApp and keeping in contact with your family. But it also means it's so easy to click over to the work email and then it gets into your head and you want to respond. And so, what I have found, like you said, Salisha, is that we need to learn to redraw the boundaries so that we adequately spend time with family. We give the 8 hours to work, but there is also that important time of self care, like you say. And I want to remind us, as you said, self care is not selfish. And I can say that one of the drawbacks of being passionate about your work and success is that sometimes, Alicia, you alluded, or I think it was Dr. Kezia who alluded to mental health and spiritual well being. You could find yourself becoming spiritually dry, and even for persons who may not be a Christian like I am, you find that many surveys of leaders and executives show that everyone has a spiritual component and have said that when they delve into that spiritual area, it makes them stronger and more successful as a leader. So, self care, drawing boundaries and finding time to refresh, to heal. Lashonda spoke about stress not always being a negative thing, but when you refresh and heal, it means you can counterbalance the stress. As it comes, you refresh and then you go again. Those are some of the reflections that I've had. It's been a challenge, but I've managed to start to redraw boundaries, and it is a journey. So it's not like I'm 100% there.
Yes, and those are critical points that you mentioned. Dr. Kezia, do you want to weigh in on how you go about setting boundaries and creating that balance in your life?
So, Celicia, I wanted to interject to something Siobhan said. I think she mentioned earlier that we don't realize, or we have a culture here that downplays mental health. We think about mental health as being not important. So I wanted to mention that some mental disorders that we need to highlight or take note of are things that we just pass over, and they might be things that we all experience. For example, depression, anxiety disorders, eating disorders, addictive habits. And these addictive habits don't necessarily mean drugs. They could mean alcohol. It could mean porn. It could mean social media. It could mean a variety of things. And so when we talk about mental health, it's not just about these diseases where people are crazy and they talk to themselves, but it's anything that affects your mood, your ability to cope, how you behave. So I just wanted us to reflect on that because, as we've been saying since the beginning, self-care is not selfish. And so we need to be aware that women are experiencing these things daily. And in raising awareness, we can be able to intervene.
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
Siobhan.
if I may jump in, thanks, Alicia. I think hearing Kezia, Dr. Kezia, and looking again at boundaries, I think one or two of the things that I wanted to drop in there again is that during the pandemic, you found that working from home, a lot of people ended up working much longer hours. And so you found persons giving tips like if you work in the living room, work there, and the minute you get to 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, that is your cutoff. You move to another space in your home, whether it's to the kitchen to start to prepare dinner or something like that, so that you start to create those boundaries between work and family. And another example persons had given, and I think Lashonda was an advocate for this in the last session or episode, where we talked about exercise. And so you found that some persons, even now at my office, I see them practicing, and maybe I need to join, where they, at lunch, they take that time and they do a walk. I mean, in Guyana, our weather might not be conducive, with the heat for walking during your lunch hour, but just creating that space between work where you don't eat at your desk. And so those are just two things that I wanted to throw in terms of boundary setting.
Siobhan. And what Dr. Kezia highlighted are critical for us to begin to identify. We may think that they're normal, and we may think that, okay, this is just it is a phase, and we're accustomed saying, or we have that saying where, oh, it will pass with age, or it will pass with time, and then that doesn't happen, and it becomes chronic, and then so it becomes in such a state that then we now have to pull right back and start all over again. But as we begin to continue to examine, self-care is not selfish. Lashonda, can you talk to us about some habits that we can inculcate in our daily life that can help us to improve our mental health?
So my first advice is to put down the phone, get away from social media. Um, a lot of us, we live our life on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram, and there is a world out there that needs exploring. And I say let's explore it. And it's just as simple as, taking a walk. If you work a regular 8-hour shift, you can take your lunch, go for a walk, um, down probably one of the busy streets, do window shopping, um, take your mind off of these like stressors and just put it at ease. Here in Guyana, we have what we would call the seawall, and it's equivalent to a beach area. Um, you can go take your lunch there instead of at the office, or if you're in school, at school. Um, I think one of the most important things too with that is that a change in scenery can change your mindset. Sometimes you're stuck there in a dark room, lights, AC, no breeze from the outside environment. So that's good in creating a mindset that is more optimistic. um, in addition to that, you also have to remember that not because you are in a relationship in terms of whether it's family, your father, your mother, grandparents, aunts, uncles, or if you have best friends or close workmates, you must set boundaries with them too as well. We have a problem in the Caribbean where because we feel that we have this proximity to a person, they are always entitled to have our ears. But that is not necessarily the case. You know, some people tend to try and dump all their negativity on you. And you're a person, you're human. So that is going to affect you eventually. So it's advisable that you also watch the relationships you form and watch what you are intaking as well. If you're taking a negative every single day, eventually you are going to have a negative or pessimistic mindset. So surround yourself with people who would encourage you, with people who would make you feel genuine, make you feel happy. At the same time, that doesn't mean that they are going to allow you to go down a dark path or the wrong path as well. Another mental health tip or self care tip is that take up a hobby, something you can do outside of your regular schedule. For example, I'm studying at university, and recently I found that I love puzzles. So every now and again, I would lay out a puzzle and just set it up, try to set it up, and it put my mind at ease, especially when I'm having my studying sessions. And sometimes you get frustrated. Sometimes you feel as though, you're not getting a concept and you're about to blow a fuse. The puzzles would help me to just ease and relax, and then I can go back to studying with a new perspective, with a new mindset. So taking up a hobby too is also another way that you can improve your self care, improve your mental health as well.
Thank you. Imani, how can you add to that in terms of you looking at the social, physical, mental, emotional? What are some of the ways that women, young women, and girls, older women can inculcate into their daily lives?
Definitely. So something that I'm big on, and I would encourage anybody to be big on, is me time. I think it's important to have me time. Um, a lot of times we're so caught up in our work life, in our family lives, and so on. But it's important that we take time for ourselves. And I can share an example. Whereas I'm currently studying, so my classes are at night and I go to work and I have such a busy day and I felt so much pressure. I was getting exhausted and so on. And I realized this is not working out for me because my focus wasn't there. I became extremely stressed. So I decided that I'm gonna take a me day. So over the weekend I went to the spa and I did my pedicure and so on. And it seems so simple, but it actually worked. And something else I can share is a day at work. Working in the health field can be a lot mentally, because you're exposed to so many people with so many problems that they have, and you kind of feel it for them. So I was at work one day and my morning was crazy because I see all these patients, and I was feeling a bit down because of what I was seeing. So on my lunch period, I decided that I'm going to go sit on the seawall and I'm just going to relax and just cool my mind. So that, I mean, it helps. It helps you to relax and it helps to distract your mind from anything that would cause you to feel a lot of pressure. Something else that I would recommend is involve yourself in safe spaces. Involve yourself in groups that you can relate to, like with other young girls or women. There are groups for different things or different situations. Young mothers, people in menopause, there are groups for many things, so you can involve yourself in those groups where you can speak or chat with women that relate to your situation. And something else that I would like to push is counseling. A lot of people do not like counseling because from the time you go to counseling, people think that something is wrong with you, which is not true. Counseling actually helps a lot, even with simple stress, um, little things in life that you find that you can't figure out. You can always go talk to a professional, and they will guide you through that process. So I think that counseling is a big one that we should focus on too.
Manish. Siobhan, can you talk to us about some spiritual well-being or self-care habits that we can include in our daily lives?
Well, Salisha, I think I was going to reflect that one of the reasons that many of us may be successful on the job is because, like I said, we have this depth of
Yeah.
spiritual resilience, if we want to say that.
Mhm.
And so I want to just underscore the power of that. And as we speak about self care, there are kingdom principles that speak about us being God's handiwork, created for good works. And we can't do good works if we are not well or we're not complete. It speaks of us being our bodies being a temple. And so just wanting to signal that when you have a temple, you take care of it and you refresh it. From a spiritual perspective, I want to caution us, like I said, not to become dry. And so naturally, finding time to delve into God's word, because in his word there is a lot of advice around renewing your minds, so that if you're worried and you read about renewing your mind, you start to set that aside. One of the best rooms in my home is my shower. I think that's the prayer room for me, my husband, and many others. So when I get into that room, yes, I take a long time showering, but I'm also refreshing and I'm also praying. And believe you me, I'm pretty sure if you polled our home, when we step out of there, the number of ideas and solutions that we come out with, whether it's for the office, whether it's for ministry, or whether it's for our family. I think a third principle that we should follow, or I encourage us to because it's worked for me, is having a support system. And a spiritual support system, so that when you are facing a particular challenge, and I call up Salisha and she gives me a testimony of how she has gone through, or you call up Lashonda and she does the same, it empowers us. And this is why as Christians, you don't only fellowship and meditate on the word of God in your home, but you also go out and fellowship with brethren. And on the other side, I want to shift to buttress what Imani said about counseling, and also to introduce the concept of coaching. As a manager in my office, I've had to navigate leading teams in the pandemic, everyone working from home, and then learning to lead teams in a hybrid setting, and now learning to encourage teams to come back, or workers to come back to the office. And so, what I have found is that using a leadership coach has helped me on my journey to documenting what is not, where I'm not spending the right amount of time, and where I need to shift my time to. And oftentimes, a coach is not to tell you what you're doing wrong, but simply to make you aware of what you need to do. And maybe finally, Salisha, if we think of the principle of fasting, it's a kingdom principle, but it is a principle that speaks to discipline and a lifestyle. And I have found that every time I come out of a fast, not only spiritually, not only for the family, but professionally, I am more whole, I am more ready to respond to issues, because you've developed disciplines that can cause you to put away some, how do I say? I think Dr. Kezia spoke about addictions. And for me, I consider watching television as my one of my me times, Imani, where at about 9 p.m. when the kids are about to go off to bed, I'm in the living room alone and I'm refreshing myself. But you could find that that becomes an addiction because you watch one series into the other, and then you go past midnight. So I want to posit that fasting, I don't only set aside food, but you try to set aside some of the habits. Do I succeed every time? No. But it's a challenge or an opportunity that others can pick up and see how it works for them.
Thank you, Siobhan. I agree with you. Sometimes we go into these, we start doing something and it may be good. And I know I have the whole period of fasting is also critical because it's not putting away only food, but some things that you do constantly without even recognizing that they become an addiction, or you know you have to do it. I know for me mine is online shopping, and so now I have willed myself not to buy anything during my period of fasting, and it has worked. It's tempting to jump online and just press that at the cart and check out, but it's the discipline that you want to encourage in your life. Dr. Kizia, your final remarks as we come to a close on self-care is not selfish.
I love the examples given by Imani and Lashonda with respect to self-care and Javon's boundaries that she has the examples she's given us to set. But I wanted to add that additionally, your mental health, it impinges on everything else, which includes your physical health, your emotional state, everything. And it's important as well to eat well, because what we eat, what we put into our body, will affect what we put out, our mood, how we react. Additionally, we need to sleep. Sleep is very, very important. So I wanted to caution us that you need to make sure that you get a good night's rest, because this prepares you to handle stresses, to handle the day ahead, to cope with anything that may come your way in the day, during the day, on the job, whatever stresses may arise. And I wanted to close by saying, since my specialty involves children, we need to remember that the mental health of our children is important as well. They are important. And so when they need to express themselves, we need to, those little ones have big feelings and we need to allow them to express it.
Thank you so much, ladies. We have discussed several areas of self-care, and as we bring the discussion to an end, we want to leave these reminders with you, to all our women who are listening today, to our young women, our older women, to our girls. Great health is dependent on how you take ownership of you. And we have all said that in some way or the other. It's you taking stock of, okay, this is where I am, this is where I need to be, this is where I'd like to be, and speak that into motion. And we want to encourage you, women and girls, take ownership of your mental health. Four critical things for us to remember as we leave: nutrition. Dr. Kezia mentioned that. Nutrition is critical. Sleep, sleep hygiene, that is critical in our overall mental health being. Social support, we talked about that. The need to connect and also the need to disconnect. And so we must find the balance in that. Physical activity, we also discussed that. And so we want to leave those with you: nutrition, proper sleep or sleep hygiene, social support, physical activity, and not forgetting the spiritual aspect, where if you need to speak to someone, find someone that you can relate to, clergy, someone that you can connect with and share with, counseling, as Imani described earlier. And so we leave you this evening, or whatever time zone you've joined us, to remind you that self-care is not selfish. Join us again for another episode of Choices Global. a production of First Assembly of God, Workmanville, Georgetown, Guyana. See you soon. Take care of you.